This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. This week, the Isle of Wight becomes the first place to test out the UK government's coronavirus app. It'll tell people if they've come close to someone infected by COVID-19 so they can then self-isolate while they see if they develop symptoms. It's a major part of the UK's lockdown lifting strategy, but our editorial column says its first test will be to see if people actually use it.
In normal times, a government app which monitored where you go on your phone would be the last thing people wanted to install. But these aren't normal times. If the government can reassure people about privacy and the system works, then it will still only function if enough people use the app. Researchers at Oxford estimate that if 56% of the population download and run it, the outbreak will be halted. But that's an ambitious target. Singapore, which developed an app early, found that lots of people didn't use it. Australia's app COVID Safe is now a week old, and 4.5 million people have installed it. A lot, but still under a quarter of the population. Australia's PM is telling people that using the app will get pubs open sooner. Boris Johnson rang him for tips last night. Expect a similar big sell here, too.
So there's a lot of ifs surrounding the app, but we are expecting Boris Johnson to announce on Sunday how the UK will begin to ease lockdown restrictions. The Evening Standard's political editor Joe Murphy is with me now over the phone. And Joe, what do we think he's going to say?
Well, what we're not expecting to hear is him to say lockdown is being eased from such and such a date, so let's all get back to work. Nicola Sturgeon, as usual, has blown the gaff today by saying that she expects another 3 weeks of lockdown at least.
Although we're making real and significant progress, and that is definitely the case, the numbers still being infected by the virus and the all-important R number remain too high right now to make any meaningful change without risking the virus running quickly out of control again. So all things considered, and while, let me stress, decisions are yet to be formally taken, it is very likely that on Thursday I will be asking you to stick with lockdown for a bit longer.
So what we're going to get from the Prime Minister, probably on Sunday, is a plan. And this is something that I think a lot of us have been hoping to see. This is the route map back to work, and hopefully in time back to the cinema and the pub, but that's not for a long time. But getting the economy moving again with some changes to some of the rules, some safety measures, a lot of safety measures, and a sort of plan for a staged firing up the engines one by one, so that they can, over a period of many weeks, let some people free and see what the impact is on the reproduction rate number. And if things are going okay, let some other people free to work. And then if that's working, then maybe a bit of socialising after hours will be allowed.
Parts of these plans are quite interesting to me. There's been a suggestion that they might relax the 2 metre apart rule.
The 2 metre rule has been at the core of social distancing from the very start of this. There's always been a little bit of a flexibility implied in it. The 2 metre rule is you must stay 2 metres apart from other people wherever possible. And that wherever possible has always been observed but not really discussed. And certainly if you've been out and about, if you've just been to the shops, you'll know occasions when it's unavoidable to pass people in the shopping aisle that you pass closer than 2 metres. But what is changing is that they are preparing to be more explicit about the exceptions that have to be made if people are going to get back to work in the warrens that are some offices, and even the bigger offices. If they're going to observe strict social distancing, you won't get very many people into them. And the exception really boils down to this, David, which is if it's a brief encounter within 2 metres, it's not likely to be very dangerous. If it's in a very tight place, then you are going to have to use PPE or shields and have that all prepared, ready for people.
I can imagine there's quite a lot of tight places in Westminster, though, Joe. We're going to see MPs in PPE.
Well, I ventured back to the House of Commons last week, David, to interview Keir Starmer, and it was very interesting that they've got a lot of things set up. For example, on the lift up to my office, there was a sign saying no more than one person in the lift at any time. Now, that's okay for me. I work on the third floor. I can shin up the stairs. But if you're on floor 20 of Canary Wharf and you're in a lift that normally has 20 people squished in, how do you cope with that and get people to their offices in short order? The other thing that we had at the House of Commons was one-way systems. So there were sort of those nice ropes that you see in cinemas of a certain vintage had been placed along corridors so that there was a one-way system on either side of the rope. And that's kind of thing we're going to see everywhere, one-way systems especially. If corridors can be one-way, then there's much less risk of people passing each other. Routes made in sticky tape glued to the carpets everywhere, you're going to see a lot of that. As for lifts, yes, restrictions maybe, and this is from talking to people, what do you do with a lift designed for 15 or 20 people? And you'll remember some tube stations rely on these too. Well, the answer is you reduce the number of people using them very, very severely unless you can somehow put screens in or have everybody use PPE or hold their breath for 5 minutes. Not sure if that's going to work.
And there are other kind of really fine details emerging from this strategy. One that alarms me, because I'm the worst journalist in the world, Joe, and I never have a pen on me. I'm always borrowing people's pens. I would steal all yours if we were in the same office, but you're at Westminster and I'm in our Kensington office. But I've never got a pen, and now we're not going to be allowed to borrow people's pens.
You're going to have to get one of these pens that hangs round your neck, David, so you can't lose it. And to be honest, that might be a blessing for everybody else in the office.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.